Yu Zitong's essence spirit was trapped in a narrow corner, like a fly with broken wings, crashing about in all directions. Every time it tried to fly out from there, it was forced back midway by a surge of black liquid, and then a deadly flash of cold light would follow behind it, intermittently slashing at the light cluster, continuously weakening the glow of the green light. He was filled with despair. Although the opponent's sword strikes had weakened his essence spirit considerably, he did not care much about that. What truly left him helpless was the continuous erosion of that black liquid. Ever since he was splashed by the liquid, he had felt an itchy, numb sensation in his essence spirit, along with weakness and powerlessness, as well as the gradual wearing away of his remaining magical power. More fatally, it hindered Yu Zitong from casting spells, causing his techniques to repeatedly fail, as if he were being sealed away. "Why are you killing me? Why?" Facing Han Li's cold and merciless attacks, Yu Zitong's hoarse cries occasionally echoed from the light cluster, filled with unwilling resentment. However, Han Li said nothing, responding only with the rapidly swinging sharp blade in his hand. Soon, Yu Zitong's voice gradually faded, growing weaker and weaker, until only faint groans remained, and then there was no sound at all. Han Li did not stop immediately. Instead, he delivered more than a dozen slashes at the essence spirit, which had fallen to the ground and was as weak as a candle flame. Only after confirming that he truly could not extinguish the last remaining trace of green light did he sheath his soft sword, wrapping it back around his belt. Only then did Han Li coldly say, "I never work with anyone who swears oaths in the name of their own parents. Not to mention letting myself follow in Dr. Mo's footsteps and trust promises from someone like you." With a cold glance at the final wisp of Yu Zitong's essence spirit, Han Li turned around without hesitation and walked to the stone door, pushing open the heavy entrance. As the stone door opened, several blinding rays of sunlight poured in from outside, shining onto the remaining essence spirit. With a soft poof, the faint green light flickered once, and then instantly extinguished, turning into wisps of curling green smoke that vanished into the air. In this way, the only trace Yu Zitong had left in this world was completely erased by Han Li, leaving no way for anyone to trace him. It should be said that Han Li knew essence spirits feared light thanks to Dr. Imo, who extinguished many lamps upon entering the room. Otherwise, he would have had no way to deal with such an indestructible final hidden threat, and would have remained constantly on edge. However, Han Li's easy destruction of the opponent's essence spirit also relied on another prepared weapon, a tube of 7 poisons water. This poison, improved from the 5 poisons water previously taken by Dr. Imo, had a new ingredient added, earth mushroom flower. This poisonous herb was not only highly toxic to ordinary people, but also greatly interfered with cultivators' essence spirits. It was precisely this that prevented Yu Zitong from successfully casting spells, leading to the easy destruction of his essence spirit. As for why Han Li first sprayed the 7 poisons water on the opponent's essence spirit, it was merely influenced by various legends. In those stories, all demons and ghosts were afraid of things like rooster blood or black dog blood. On a sudden inspiration, Han Li treated Yu Zitong's essence spirit as if it were a ghost. This accidental success, who knows if Yu Zitong, if he were aware of it underground, would be so enraged that he would vomit blood again and die once more. Han Li naturally did not understand this coincidence. He only knew that even if the poison had failed, once he opened the door, the opponent's essence spirit would still inevitably be destroyed. With such thorough preparation, he struck decisively and mercilessly against Yu Zitong. Now, he was finally freed. He no longer had to live a life with a blade held to his throat, constantly prepared for death. Slowly walking back to the center of the stone house, Han Li stood there silently for a moment. Suddenly, he leapt into the air, rising more than 3 feet high, and let out several loud roars, desperately releasing the joy in his heart. At that moment, he truly returned to himself, a 16-year-old boy by nature. "I am finally free. I am finally free." With a sharp snap, Han Li's voice was suddenly cut off as if severed by a blade, and his cheers abruptly stopped. A massive figure wandering not far outside the stone door entered his field of vision. It was the giant man known as Tai Nu. Han Li's expression suddenly turned very ugly. The moment he saw the figure, he seemed to feel a faint pain in his shoulder again. He had made a major mistake, once again neglecting this person's existence and failing to extract from Yu Zitong's essence spirit information about the giant man's origin and weaknesses. However, what slightly relieved Han Li was that the giant man seemed completely uninterested in what had happened inside the stone house. He merely paced back and forth outside, strictly obeying Dr. Mo's final orders, not even glancing toward the open stone door. Han Li frowned, feeling that the situation was somewhat troublesome. The giant man was clearly a bit dull-witted, knowing only how to obey orders blindly. But to Han Li, such a person was the most difficult to deal with. He could not be persuaded through words to stop fighting and make peace. And once they came to blows, Han Li was no match for him. The only thing that could threaten the giant man was that tube of poisonous water, now completely empty. Han Li paced back and forth in large strides inside the room, racking his brains trying to find a way to subdue his opponent. But for the moment his mind was a complete mess with no clear idea forming. By chance, Han Li's gaze fell upon Dr. Mo's corpse, and an idea suddenly struck him. Perhaps I can find something on the corpse that can counter that giant man, Han Li thought to himself. He glanced toward the doorway. The giant man was still wandering back and forth tirelessly, showing no sign of approaching. Only then did Han Li relax slightly. He walked over in a few steps to Dr. Mo's corpse and, without hesitation, reached out with both hands and began carefully searching it inch by inch. One by one, strange objects, some familiar, some completely foreign, were pulled out by Han Li. He sorted them into two piles based on how suspicious they seemed, placing them to the side. He gradually became somewhat astonished. Dr. Mo truly carried a bizarre assortment of items, many of which were clearly lethal at first glance. A sleeve arrow that sealed the throat upon bloodshed. A packet of poison sand soaked in snake venom. More than a dozen extremely sharp boomerangs. As the number of items increased, Han Li's breathing grew slightly more rapid. The more carefully he searched, the more shocked he became. Only now did he realize just how fortunate he had been when he fought Dr. Mo. If the other party had not intended to capture him alive, he would likely have already lost his life. Wiping the cold sweat from his face, Han Li mocked himself inwardly. To think that I, a living person, will be frightened by a dead man's belongings. Finally finishing the search, Han Li began examining the pile of items he had deemed suspicious one by one. This small bottle smells terrible. It seems to be some kind of antidote, probably harmless. This strange weapon, it looks like a little wheel. Though I don't know what it's for, it probably has nothing to do with the giant man. I'll set it aside for now. As for this session, Han Li fiddled with the items as he spoke to himself, looking quite engaged. In his hand was an ordinary sachet embroidered with plain white silk flowers. Logically, such an ordinary sachet should not arouse suspicion. But Han Li felt that while such a common item would be appropriate on an ordinary person, it was quite unusual on someone like Dr. Mo, a formidable schemer. Han Li weighed it in his hand. It was very light, likely containing nothing heavy. He then pinched it and felt a papery texture, as if it contained pages of paper. His spirits lifted. He tore open the sachet and, as expected, found several sheets of paper inside. He glanced over them briefly and recognized Dr. Mo's handwriting, gaining some assurance. Looking more closely, Han Li was stunned. It turned out to be a suicide note left by Dr. Mo, feeling puzzled and increasingly curious. Han Li picked up the papers and read them carefully. After finishing, Han Li let out a long, heavy sigh toward the sky, then frowned deeply, his thoughts becoming heavy and troubled. He clasped his hand behind his back and paced like a little old man, walking aimlessly. Every few steps he would stop to think, then, unable to decide, walk a few more steps before stopping again. In this manner, without realizing it, Han Li began circling around Dr. Mo's corpse like a millstone donkey pulling a grind wheel, turning endlessly. His expression fluctuated unpredictably, flushing red one moment, turning pale the next, showing his inner turmoil and loss of control. Such an unsettled demeanor appearing on Han Li would, if Li Feiyu saw it, surely earn him loud ridicule. The reason Han Li had become like this was entirely because the suicide note brought him both extremely bad news and a difficult dilemma. The antidote to the corpse worm pill was actually poisonous itself, a rare and insidious poison. According to the letter, this poison could only be cured by his family's solar warming jade. There was no other way. Even legendary miracle antidotes would be useless against it. Thus, in those pages, Dr. Mo clearly told Han Li that this suicide note, along with the poison he had previously administered, was a contingency plan for the worst-case scenario. If his attempt at soul possession failed, or any accident occurred, then the one most likely to survive would be Han Li. For the sake of his posthumous arrangements, he intended in the letter to make a simple deal with Han Li, one that would benefit both sides. It would not only eliminate his own lingering concerns, but also grant Han Li a great fortune and countless benefits. As for whether Yu Zitong would ultimately be the one to survive, Dr. Mo had not considered this possibility at all. In the letter, he spoke of him in a tone of contempt, believing that this man was not only cold and selfish by nature, but also greedy for life and afraid of death, possessing nothing more than a bit of petty cleverness. Even as a cultivator, he would achieve nothing significant, and the one who would laugh last would definitely not be him. When Han Li saw this, he felt a bitter sense of irony. Dr. Mo, so calculating and scheming, probably never expected that in the end he himself would fall into the trap of someone he looked down upon. If Han Li had not concealed the true progress of a longevity art, there was a very high chance that he would have perished together with Dr. Mo, only allowing Yu Zitong to reap the benefits. Of course, this was also due to Dr. Mo being blinded and mentally disoriented by his own dream of attaining immortality. It seemed that no matter what kind of cultivator one was, they could never be underestimated. In the letter, Dr. Mo's proposed arrangement was very simple. He required Han Li to visit his home within at least 1 year, and at most 2 years. First, the poison he was afflicted with would erupt after 2 years. Second, he had a wife, concubines, a daughter, and a considerable family estate. Although he had made many arrangements before leaving and created a smokescreen to conceal the truth, if he did not return for a long time, his unruly subordinates and enemies would likely grow suspicious, endangering his family. Therefore, Han Li had to go before things worsened, protect his wife and children, and properly settle them, preferably allowing them to live ordinary lives free from the dangers of the martial world. As compensation for his earlier scheme against Han Li, and as payment for asking him to disregard past grievances and come to his aid, he was willing to designate one of his daughters to marry Han Li. The dowry would be half of all his assets, along with the solar warming jade. Before leaving, Dr. Mo had already given the jade to his wife, specifying it as part of his daughter's dowry. Therefore, for the sake of his own life, Han Li had no choice but to accept the marriage even if he did not wish to. Of course, he also clearly stated that his enemies were extremely powerful, and even his own subordinates were difficult to control. With Han Li's current abilities, directly confronting them would likely be unmanageable. For this reason, he had specially prepared 2 false identities in hidden compartments at his residence, along with tokens and handwritten letters of proof, allowing Han Li to choose the most suitable identity. He also listed in the letter the names of loyal subordinates, suspicious individuals, and enemies, as well as other important details requiring attention. To prove the sincerity of this final testament, he appended at the end the methods for controlling and summoning the giant man Iron Slave and the Cloud Wing Bird. What puzzled Han Li somewhat was that the letter vaguely indicated that Iron Slave was a soulless corpse puppet, merely a walking shell, and that its original true soul had already been reincarnated, so Han Li need not feel distressed upon seeing it. This left Han Li somewhat confused, Did he really look like someone overly sentimental? However, even setting aside the matter of poison, when faced with such a vast fortune, it would be a lie to say Han Li was not tempted. He had always been very sensitive to money, and he was genuinely interested in Dr. Mo's proposed deal. As for marrying his daughter, this also stirred an unusual feeling in Han Li, who was at the age of first awakening emotions. After all, just from Dr. Mo's appearance, one could infer that his daughter could not be ugly. But the risks involved were also extremely significant. A single misstep could cost him his life. The enemies that Dr. Mo regarded as opponents were not easy to deal with at all. Dr. Mo, having meticulously arranged everything after death, had bound Han Li and the safety of his wife and daughter together in a deadly trap that combined life, beauty, and immense wealth. It seemed Han Li would have no choice but to swallow this honey-coated poison with a bitter face. After wandering around for quite a while, Han Li finally stopped. Whether I accept this deal or not, I'll decide later if I still can't resolve the poison, he ultimately thought helplessly. Then he glanced at the giant man outside, recalling the strange words in the will, and felt a trace of curiosity. He decided to try controlling the giant man. Han Li crouched down and found a small bronze bell among the pile of items. It was small enough to be held in one hand, exquisitely crafted with perfectly balanced proportions, clearly the work of a master craftsman. The only unusual feature was faint traces of blood-like marks on the surface, making it stand out sharply. Han Li carefully examined this magical artifact called the soul-summoning bell, but could not see what made it so powerful. According to the letter, this item could actually control such a terrifying creature as the giant man. Truly unbelievable. Holding the small bell in his left hand and a dagger in his right, Han Li cautiously stepped out of the stone door and slowly approached the giant man with great care. When he was more than 2 zhang away from the giant man, Han Li stopped, unwilling to approach any closer in case something unexpected happened. At this moment, the giant man was standing upright with his back to Han Li. Clang! A clear, crisp bell sound rang out from the small bell. It was the sound produced when Han Li lightly tapped the bronze bell with his dagger. Han Li frowned. The sound seemed no different from an ordinary bell. Could this really subdue the giant man? A hint of hesitation arose in his heart. He lowered his body slightly, ready to flee back to the stone hut at the first sign of trouble. Upon hearing the bell, the giant man's shoulders twitched slightly, as if he had reacted. Han Li felt a surge of joy and hurriedly began striking the bronze bell repeatedly. Clang! Clang! The bell rang in rapid succession, and the giant man's body began to tremble along with it. In the end, even his steps became unsteady. He could no longer remain standing and finally collapsed heavily on the ground, unconscious. The impact of the giant man's massive body against the dry ground stirred up a cloud of dust, which caught the unprepared Han Li and made him sneeze several times in a row, leaving him in a rather sorry state. However, Han Li had no time to care about such minor matters. He quickly rushed to the giant man, grabbed the hood from his head, and pulled it off, revealing a swollen face that made Han Li, at first glance, feel a chill of horror. Forcing down his discomfort, Han Li did not dare to examine it closely. He hurriedly used his dagger to lightly cut his own wrist, letting fresh blood flow freely. He splattered it all over the giant man's face. Only when the entire face was completely covered did Han Li press on the wound, swiftly find a clean strip of cloth from his belongings, and bind it around his wrist to stop the bleeding. Then he calmly stood to the side, watching the giant man's reaction. A strange thing happened. The vast amount of blood slowly seeped into the giant man's skin. None of it was left behind. Han Li watched in stunned silence, so shocked that he did not even notice he had pressed too hard on his wound, causing fresh blood to seep through the cloth again. After all the blood had been absorbed, the giant man opened his eyes and slowly stood up. His expression was dull, his eyes vacant, showing no trace of emotion. But the moment he turned his head and his gaze met Han Li's, Han Li felt a sudden buzz in his mind. A strange emotion, both unfamiliar and oddly familiar, emerged in his heart, as if something foreign had suddenly taken root deep within him, circling around him like a tamed little dog, calling out with attachment without stopping. Hanli was startled, but quickly regained his composure. He noticed that the giant man's previously rigid expression had changed. It was now filled with obedience, giving Hanli the sensation that he could control the other's life and death entirely. It was an extremely peculiar feeling. Suppressing his excitement, Hanli gave a test command in a deep voice, "Go tear down that stone door." The giant man said nothing. He strode to the stone door in a few steps, raised his two clenched fists high like twin iron hammers, and smashed it to pieces in just a few strikes. Then he returned to Han Li like a gale wind, waiting for his next command. Han Li, who had never been one to experience extreme joy or sorrow, could not help but break into a wide smile at this moment. Having such a powerful thug at his beck and call, what danger in the future could possibly matter? As Han Li excitedly imagined the wonderful life ahead, he continued to look the giant man up and down with fervent eyes. The more he looked, the more satisfied he felt. Even a previously hideous face now seemed unexpectedly pleasing. He even began to feel a strange sense of familiarity. Familiar? Han Li was startled by this thought. How could he possibly feel familiar with a face he had never seen before? With this question in mind, Han Li carefully examined the giant man's features, trying to find the reason. Gradually, he realized that if the swollen features were restored to normal and reduced in size, then pieced back together, the face was not ugly at all. In fact, it looked rather honest and familiar, a visage he knew extremely well. Han Li's face turned slightly pale. He fell silent for a long time before slowly reaching out both hands to gently touch the giant man's face. "Brother Zhang, is it really you?" he asked in a very low, calm voice. This reconstructed face bore a striking resemblance to his long-missing friend Zhang Tai. Combined with the inexplicable final words left by Dr. Mo, Han Li was now 90% certain that the giant man was deeply connected to Zhang Tai. Could it really be, as the letter had implied, that this giant body was merely Zhang Tai's shell, while his soul was already gone? But why had his body become so enormous and terrifying? Han Li used his fingers to feel the giant man's cold body temperature, looking at his dull, lifeless eyes, while inwardly speculating about everything Zhang Tai had gone through. It was highly likely that Dr. Mo, in collusion with Yu Zitong, had abducted Zhang Tai, who had already made some progress in the elephant hide art back then, and fabricated the illusion of his departure, deceiving the many eyes and ears of the Seven Mysteries sect. Then, in secret, they used some kind of spell to strip Zhang Tai of his soul, afterward transforming his body into something so bizarre, resembling the state of a fully mastered elephant hide art practitioner. Han Li's guess was quite accurate. The real situation was indeed not far off. Back then, Dr. Mo had a sudden idea. He intended to combine the elephant hide art with corpse refinement techniques provided by Yu Zitong to create a batch of powerful corpse puppets that would obey orders and sweep through the martial world. However, in such a short time, he only managed to create this one giant man, whom Dr. Mo treasured greatly. He usually hid him in a secret place at the foot of the mountain and only brought him back during his last return to the mountain. However, Yu Zitong had no interest in such neither here nor there corpse puppets, and even looked down upon them. Because when his Dharma body was still intact, he had far too many methods to subdue such incomplete corpse puppets. Moreover, compared with the advanced iron armor corpses of true immortal cultivators, these were far inferior in power and could only show off in the mortal world. Their only advantage was probably their simplicity, easy to refine, and anyone with even a bit of magical power could produce them. After a long while, Han Li suddenly withdrew his hand from the giant man's face and averted his uneasy gaze from him, staring instead at the broken stone door as he fell into a daze. At that moment, he felt a chill in his heart, not from sorrow over Zhang Tai's tragic fate, but from unease at his own cold indifference. He had originally thought that upon learning of his friend's miserable end, he would raise his head in rage and shout the names Mo Jiren and Yu Zitong loudly, his voice filled with hatred and fury. But in reality, aside from a slight sense of sorrow, he felt little emotional impact or anger, as if the one who had fallen into such a state was not his former friend Zhang Tai, but a stranger unrelated to him. Was it because he knew that the Zhang Tai before him was merely an empty shell, not the real person? Or had his heart already become so cold and hardened? This selfish, indifferent reaction even frightened Han Li himself. Only then did he realize that at some point, he had become so unfamiliar to himself. Han Li finally snapped out of his daze. He gave the giant man a complicated look, unsure how to address him. Recalling Dr. Mo's words about soul already lost and walking corpse, Han Li looked up toward the sky and said softly, "Brother Zhang, you must have already been reincarnated by now. The body you left behind is now useless. Let me make use of it for a while. I will use it with great care, and I hope you will not blame me." After saying this prayer-like words, Han Li felt slightly more at ease, as if he had hypnotized himself. Then he said to the giant man, "Since you are the shell left behind by Brother Zhang, without an independent soul, I shall call you Chu Han. I hope you can help me in the days to come." After hearing Han Li's words, the giant man simply stood there dumbly, without moving. Aside from his usual obedient expression, there was no reaction at all. He truly seemed to lack any independent intelligence and could only passively accept orders. To think I'm talking to a body without intelligence, how foolish I am. Han Li shook his head self-mockingly, then walked with relaxed steps toward the stone house. "Good, huh? Follow me." Han Li had completely recovered from his low mood, his expression returning to normal, as if nothing had happened. It seemed he truly had become, as he himself believed, extremely cold and rational, no longer easily troubled by emotion. Whether this astonishing change would be a blessing or a curse for Han Li on his path toward immortal cultivation, no one could say. During the time that followed, Han Li spent quite a while taking care of all the aftermath properly. He not only buried Dr. Mo's corpse under a certain large tree, but also destroyed and discarded all remaining items in the stone house. He even ordered Chu Han to smash the entire stone house apart, reducing it to a completely unrecognizable pile of rubble, before finally stopping. After all this commotion, evening had already arrived, and the sun was beginning to set. Han Li stood in front of what was once the stone house, now a heap of broken rocks, and looked around carefully, confirming nothing had been left behind. Only then did he nod in satisfaction. "Chu Han, let's go. Tomorrow there will still be a lot to deal with. It's a pity you have no intelligence and cannot speak. Otherwise, having someone to discuss things with would make me feel more at ease." In the crimson glow of the setting sun, Han Li dragged his elongated shadow behind him, muttering non-stop to the giant man, now renamed Chu Han. It seemed he had finally found someone he could confide in without complaint, a perfect listener. At this moment, there was not the slightest trace of coldness or ruthlessness in him. He looked exactly like an ordinary neighborhood boy. After arranging Chu Han properly, Han Li returned to his residence. Inside the room, he behaved like a stranger who had not returned for a long time, touching the tables and chairs here and there, looking around everywhere, while murmuring to himself, "What a long day. It feels even longer than all the 10-odd years I've lived before combined." Then, suddenly, he collapsed onto the bed and fell into a deep sleep. He was exhausted, both mentally and physically, utterly worn out. But it's really good to be alive and back. With a faint smile on his lips, he thought this just before drifting into sleep.